Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Marvel's Agents of M.A.C.E, where we are going to be breaking down the Thor movies and the first Avengers movie in preparation for Loki. Today, it's me, Drew, and I'm joined by Elisa and Luke. So, I will start by saying Thor is not... I like him as an Avenger. He's not my favorite as far as the movies go. So I was kind of like, we got to watch these movies to get ready. But I don't like the Thor movies except for Ragnarok. But I think that, I don't know if they've changed it or what, but I feel like my biggest problem with the second Thor movie was how dark everything was. But when I watched it on Disney Plus, it wasn't as dark as I remember it being. So I don't know if maybe they went back and changed it, lightened it up a little bit so I could see more. But compared to the first Thor, I enjoyed the second one more than I thought I was going to.
Hooray! I told you I was going to defend the second one when we got there.
Yeah, just a little bit ago, I was kind of thinking, I wonder where Thor sits on everyone's list, and maybe we should on our socials we should share our Marvel ranked list to see, because I'm with you. I really like Thor much more now that we've gotten the development of the character and he's really gotten into that character. But yeah, unfortunately, the first two Thor movies, they sit low on my list as well. But and I know I always see this on film Twitter. If y'all ever get on if you just search film Twitter and look through the community there, the second Thor movie is definitely not liked, but I'm on the one where I kind of put it a little bit above the first one, but I don't mind the darkness. I kind of like that. And I was kind of into the dark elves and all of that. And at this point, you had that character development, but I really like the second one more for Loki in it. That's the reason why I enjoy it. I really got into Loki's character at this point. So that's really the main reason I watch it, is just to see Loki in it.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm happy to hear that. This is one of those, I always have to feel I stand in the corner because I don't want everyone to attack me because I like the second Thor a little bit more.
Well, I just feel like the first Thor, he doesn't have his powers. He's not even Thor for 90% of the movie. At least in the second one, he's Thor the whole time.
Yeah.
He's a simple himbo with an exaggerated sense of himself.
Yeah, exactly. And stepping away, all the side characters, they're not my favorites.
Yeah, they're just they just kind of pop up out of nowhere in the first Thor movie, but in the second one, we go back to they kind of develop their characters a little bit more, and we kind of get to see who each of them are and their tropes that they kind of stick with, and it's okay, all right, these are his friends, whatever. But I definitely can see how in the first Thor, it's they still weren't really sure what they were going to do with him. How do you make a god relatable to everyone? So they just made him not a god for the
humanize
90% of the movie. Right.
Yeah.
But then in the second one, they were well, no one wants to see him walk around without his hammer the whole movie, so let's just make him Thor.
Again.
Yeah. And I definitely agree about Loki. Loki in the first Thor is a completely different character than Loki in the second Thor. He's much more subdued and doesn't make quite as many witty quips in the first movie. In the second movie, it's just quip after quip. Every time you see him, he's got something smart to say. He's doing magic all over the place.
I guess that's what prison does to you.
Makes you crazy.
Well, yeah, you got to think he's locked up, so he's probably just using that time to create his schemes of what he's going to do.
Right.
So, but you got to think being kind of concealed to that one area probably does make him a little loopy there.
I think that's definitely a possible interpretation.
I think one of the big things for me too, just again, the first time I watched the second movie, I was this is by far my least favorite of all of them. And it was for a long time. But now that I've rewatched it with a new outlook, everything about it, from the characters to even the villains, which, like, not a super strong villain. I mean, his, like, weird berserker guy was, like, more villainy than the actual villain, but they're at least more developed. I feel like the first movie, they were like, well, who do we pit against Thor? I don't know. Loki. Okay, well, no one really knows anything about him. Yeah, that's true. All right, he's going to fight the Destroyer. So, like, the big battle of the movie is him fighting the Destroyer, which, like, I mean, they kind of explained what the Destroyer was, but, like, I don't know. It wasn't like the villain of the movie. And then almost immediately, Loki is redeemed, in a sense, without us ever really seeing the bond that they have, quote. And then the movie ends, and you're just like, what did I watch?
You got to look at the setting as well. Like the first Thor movie, it's like in this middle of nowhere town. And so, you know, that's not as exciting as like, you know, big cities. You know, you look at like Avengers, and even like stepping away, you look at like DC films, like they're always like in Gotham City or Metropolis. You have there's so much going on, and like Thor is just kind of like, where are they at? Like, why there? Why did they choose there? It made me want to. I need to go back and look at the budget of the film. Maybe they just kind of like kept a lower budget and just had to work around
they
that.
blew it all on Iron Man.
Yeah.
And they spent zero money on their actors. They were like, find us super unknown people, because it doesn't matter. They need to look the part and maybe kind of be good at this. That's it. That is it. I mean, I guess like the director was Ken Branagh, and I don't know how much you guys are the folks listening to us know about him. But aside from being Gilderoy Lockhart in the Harry Potter movies, he's probably best known for doing like a ton of like Shakespeare adaptations. Like he did The Much Ado About Nothing starring himself and Emma Thompson. He did Hamlet. He's done Love's Labour's Lost, just like all over the place. And of course, stage productions. And so the main thing I notice about the first Thor movie is that it seems really, really theatrical. He's pulled in Anthony Hopkins, for one thing, who could not be more Shakespearean in how he plays Odin if he was like purposely doing that. And he might be. I don't know. I don't know him. But also, I feel like the only reason that he hired Tom Hiddleston is because he had worked with him on stage and on his own other TV show, Wallander. And so I think that a lot of what he's bringing to it is that kind of a background. And so smaller sets, focus on characters, all of that is very like theater based, I think. Oh, and whenever we were watching it together, and you guys were talking about how small the town is, I asked Mason, I was like, do you think they filmed this in an actual small town, or is this a backlot? And he's like, it looks a lot like a backlot, but I bet this is some town. Like they just went to the absolute middle of nowhere and found some place with like 300 people living in it. It was like, okay, we're taking over. Everybody out. Unless you want to be in the scene with the truck, in which case, stick around. We need a bunch of people who look like rednecks. Which also...
Yeah, the whole town. I think 100% it's a backlot. Only because every time they destroy something, especially when the Destroyer comes to town and just starts like shooting everything with his laser beam, I was like, he's not here to destroy Earth. Why is he just like blowing up this gas station? I don't understand, other than for them to be like, look, we blew up a gas station. But if you watch every time something gets destroyed, it has like a weird mechanical fall to it. So when he blows up the gas station, it all kind of looks like it's going to buckle down, but it buckles in a way that like it looks like this is all it does. It does that. They built it to do that. Well, this is an audio podcast, so you can't see my hands, but it looks like the front end of the gas station just tips forward, and then they cover it up with CG fire and flames. But it's like, God, that looked so like not fake, but like movie backlot tour. You're on that ride at Universal where they pretend like the room's crashing down around you. Like that's what it looked like to me. So then every time they showed a building, I tried to like look inside, and I was like, does this look like a building that people have been in, or does this look like an empty building used for this backlot stage? And I think that it is a stage town.
If it is a real town, I mean, they probably would have been like, this is supposed to be good for the economy. Y'all are blowing up all our time. And they'd be like, it was ugly.
Maybe maybe we need to have a fact check segment.
Oh, I would love that.
I've seen that in other podcasts. They always like shill out like the last 15, 20 minutes, and they're like, okay, now we're going to review back and we're going to fact check everything and be like, actually, this is this.
This is what we got wrong last week, everybody. Crazy. Buckle in. It's a lot.
So I'm curious about this for both of you, because for me, going into Thor, if you look at it from an actor perspective, so the actors that portray Thor and Loki, this was new to me. I didn't really know either of them from anything. So I was curious if y'all like had familiarity of them, because this was a big thing for me, is like, can I get invested in these actors for these characters?
I think I knew the Hemsworths, but only because didn't one of them date a Kardashian? Or was that post Thor?
I don't.
Or
yeah,
not
I don't
Kardashian.
know. Well, I don't know.
Cyrus.
I'm like,
yeah, his brother did.
Yeah. Well, that's his brother, and I was a little bit more familiar with his brother. But Tom Hiddleston, I don't think I'd seen anything that he was in prior to this.
I had seen, and this is because I was an English major in college, and all of us are secretly little old English ladies on the inside. They did 1 year on Masterpiece Theater that was nothing but Jane Austen adaptations and films about her life. And so I was like, oh boy. And so I just like settled in every night and I was watching it. And one of the movies that they had was one called Miss Austen Regrets. And it was about Jane Austen as an older woman. I say older. She died when she was, I think, 43, so she didn't get very old. And she's kind of teaching her niece kind of the ways of romance and how to deal with men, what she should be looking for in a spouse. And Tom Hiddleston plays a preacher who is courting her niece. And he gets very angry at her. His character is terrible, and I'm sure he's based on a real person. But he gets on to Jane Austen because all of the clergymen in her novels are a little bit ridiculous, like they're comic characters. And he said, he doesn't think that it's okay to make fun of men who devote their lives to God. And she was like, well, my dad was a preacher. This is just what I grew up with. And I remember thinking, he is so annoying. But since then, he did redeem himself, because another Masterpiece Theater thing that I think came out the same year as Thor was Return to Cranford. I don't know if you guys know Cranford, but again, miniseries, bonneted old English ladies. It's truly delightful and very cozy. And then they did a sequel series that was Return to Cranford, and he was playing a young aristocratic kid in that who fell in love with a poor girl who was played by Jodie Whittaker, who is the female Doctor Who. So I was familiar with that kind of Tom Hiddleston stuff. But I remember I didn't recognize him because he looks so different in the movie.
I'm looking at their portfolios right now. So for Tom Hiddleston, for sure, this was the first thing I saw him in. Looks like Chris Hemsworth was in Star Trek.
That's right, he was.
And I guess I just totally blanked on that one. So I had seen him in Star Trek prior, but I'm more of Star Wars than a Trekkie, so I'm sure like I just kind of like forgot about that.
I think he was in it for like 4 seconds.
Yeah, he must have been in there just.
Well, I mean, they did a great job. I do appreciate that we strayed away from like platinum blonde Thor, because that was the most distracting thing I have ever seen rewatching the first Thor movie. And every time it showed a close-up of his face, it was clearly like bleached eyebrows, or I don't know, fake eyebrows or something. They looked so bad. And every time it showed his face, I was like, please cut away from this. Like, do a wide shot again. I'm tired of look at his face. It looks so weird. And then in the second one, when they made everything darker, it was still there, but it looked like they had made everything a little bit darker for that movie. So like it was more of like a dirty blonde. And then by Ragnarok, they were like, forget it. Brown hair. Just it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At least I think in 2 and 3, it's a natural brow. They're not trying to do the weird bleached out brows. Also, audience, it's very dangerous to bleach your eyebrows. Do not do that. It was very distracting.
I can see the reason that maybe they wanted to go with a director that did more classical theater and Shakespearean stuff. I mean, if you read Thor comics, that's kind of what they want Thor to be, which is weird because he's a Norse god. You'd think that they would try to write it like a Norse mythology or something, but instead it always has the fun lettering whenever Thor speaks, and he speaks very like ye old English. And so I could see their reasoning behind that, but I don't think that either they didn't lean enough into it, or maybe they leaned too into it and it just didn't hit the mark that they were going for.
Well, also remember, they basically they kind of like create their own play that just retells the story.
Yeah,
in one of the films. So I mean, that could be just a nod to that.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you said that's all I could think when in Avengers, when Tony Stark is like, "Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?" I was like, this is funny. Like, okay. And so now I'm thinking like, maybe that was like a stab at that first Thor movie.
I think probably what they were doing was probably just poking fun at it, because this is introducing Thor, so we're getting they're getting their audience used to this character and getting the story developed, and then once you get past Avengers, I think like all of that initial stuff was kind of thrown out. Like we're just gonna keep him with his humor and make him super cool, and so yeah, I feel like that's probably all they were doing, was just poking fun at that.
Well, and bear in mind, like a huge chunk of Shakespeare's bibliography, I guess, is royal family dramas. And so it kind of ties really well into the story of the Asgardians. I mean, like dad is mad at his 2 brat kids that can't act right. That's basically the plot of King Lear, except there's 3 kids.
I do want to say that another thing that I don't know, it bugged me sort of, was that at the end of Thor and Thor 2, Loki dies, air quotes, and comes back again. And then every other movie that we see Loki, it ends with him going to jail, basically. And so it's like, man, oh man, I really hope that every episode of the Loki show doesn't end with him dying or going to jail. Like, it was such a weird thing that the first movie ends with him dying and the second movie basically ends with him dying. I mean, you see him at the very end. It's like Thor has that speech with Odin, and then he walks away, and then Odin transforms into Loki, and you're like, oh, Loki's not dead. And it's like, why'd you kill him off twice just to bring him back? Like, I don't know. I get that he's like the trickster god, but like there's got to be another trick than just fake dying.
Well, that's hope, fingers crossed, that's what we get in the series.
yeah, I hope
Hopefully.
so. If he dies more than twice, I will be upset. 2 times, that's okay.
We're just gonna turn Loki into a drinking game.
I'll be totally on board for that. That's another fact check that we would have to do, though, is if that last shot in the Dark World of Thor having the conversation with Odin, whether that conversation was already filmed and then they just decided to splice Loki in there at the end, where they're like, oh, we probably shouldn't leave him dead. But the conversation seems a little bit knowing on Odin's part, so I feel like it's something that they scripted after they decided not to, kill him.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. That would be another thing to fact check.
That would be interesting, because I mean, when he changes, it's not like he changes while Thor's walking away and we see Thor in the foreground and Loki change in the background. It's just like a random shot of Odin as he transforms into Loki. So
a curiously still shot of Odin.
Yeah. So maybe they did shoot it, and then someone was like, nah, let's make it Loki. And they're like, oh, okay.
Might as well.
I did really enjoy the end credit scene at the end of Thor 1 because it actually led somewhere, whereas the end credit scene in Thor 2 was just garbage. I mean, he comes back and then they kiss, he and Jane kiss, And then there's like that weird shot of the giant monster like chasing birds. And then it ends, and I was like, what was that? It doesn't even lead to the next movie. Why did they show us that?
Oh, yeah, those are the forgettable ones.
Yeah, it's so weird. Marvel's whole thing is that like the end of each movie leads to the next movie, and that was just like, it's like they forgot that that's what they were supposed to do. Someone was like, this would be funny.
Maybe they meant to have Jane like be in Age of Ultron, at least for like a scene, to be like, hey, yeah, we are still dating. Instead, they just dropped her name and be like, oh, yeah, they are still dating. Yeah. So maybe they were just trying to set up that. But also, side note, I really like Jane Foster as a character, but I don't like her and Thor as a couple. I feel like eventually, I mean, and I think this had to have contributed to them eventually breaking up. She has to notice that he can't really keep up with her in the, like intellectual capacity, because Thor's not dumb. He just has dumb guy energy. But that's going to run out after a while. And also, poor Sif has clearly been in love with Thor for like 1,000 years. And so, like, every time they made her like go and help Jane in the Dark World, I was like, no.
Yeah.
That's so mean. But she's supposed to be in Love and Thunder, so maybe they'll get it right in Love and Thunder, and Jane will go off and do her thing, and he'll be like, oh yeah, this one, she likes me, and she's also going to live for another 5,000 years.
Yeah, are they just gonna, set it up for her becoming Thor?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I feel like Thor is the character that would be easiest to move on to a new Thor. Or like Iron Man, you can't like, I mean, once Robert Downey's out of it, like, he's out. You can't just be like, here's new Iron Man. It's like, no
one cares about just the suit.
Yeah. Now there has to be like a whole new character built. Whereas Thor is like, there's Thor, and then there's Jane Thor. Well, if Chris wants out, and I can't remember the actress's name.
Natalie Portman?
Yeah. If Natalie wants in, be like, all right, you're Thor now. Boom, boom, swip, swap.
Well, I guess what's curious, it's like, you got to look at the hammer as well. It's like, only those that are worthy will get the power of Thor. Right? But you make a great point, because, you see that Captain America was worthy, and he possessed the power of Thor in Endgame. I feel like if, Falcon was around, I would think he would also have that capability.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Interesting. I mean,
it would be interesting.
Wasn't he? Didn't he try? Didn't they all try?
They all tried, yeah.
Yeah.
In Age of Ultron, Cap was the only one that kind of made it move, and I mean, that was fantastic little nod when, Thor was just kind of like, I knew it. Like, that's great.
Well, we've already seen an outline of Beta Ray Bill. Maybe they'll just bring him in. Or I want the Frog Thor, whatever that thing's name is. Bring that. Make that a movie. I'd watch that. Just a frog jumping around with Mjolnir.
Oh my god!
Isn't Christian Bale playing Beta Ray Bill in Love and Thunder?
Oh, is he?
That's
hang
no,
on.
no. He's not Beta Ray Bill. He's Gore.
He's Gore. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hated that arc, but anyway.
Yeah, I feel like there's things they could do. I never really understood the Beta Ray Bill like arc, but I think it would be an interesting thing to see them move into. I'm hoping that with the Loki show, I mean, we're gonna talk more about or see more about alternate dimensions and timelines and periods of time. I feel like they could use this show to really tease upcoming things. I did want to say on a I don't know, weird note. So when the first Avengers movie came out, my now fiance, and I went to the theaters for an entire day, and we watched every Marvel movie that was out with like a special thing. You watch them all in a row, and at the beginning of each movie, Agent Coulson would come out and like talk about whatever the next movie was, and then you watch the movie and everything like that. And I remember being so hyped that entire day. And then we watched the Avengers movie, and I was like, this is amazing. And when the second Avengers movie came out, we saw that at that same theater, they were doing something where you could watch, again, every Marvel movie until the second Avengers. And I was like, I really considered it. I mean, talk about a fun day just sitting in the movie theater watching like 16 movies in a row.
That'd be fun.
But I did notice that I've rewatched it multiple times now, but rewatching the Avengers after that first viewing, I did enjoy it more, I think. Because I think at the time when I watched it, I was just like, this is so cool. But I wasn't really paying that much attention. And as I watch it more, I don't know. I mean, they say they planned everything, right? Like, that's their whole shtick, is that everything's been planned from the beginning. I don't know about that. That seems ridiculous to plan that much. But it is cool to see things pop up that then come back later. I definitely feel like Thor Dark World was one of those things that maybe we didn't need it, because the only thing out of that movie that really lasted at all was the not Power Stone.
Ether?
Mind Stone. Yeah. Not Mind Stone.
Yeah.
Damn, what was it? Reality Stone?
Reality Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the only thing from that movie that really showed up ever again. Which is just, I don't know, it's kind of weird, right? Like, we spent 2.5 hours watching this movie to get one thing that comes up 10 movies later.
Yeah. So I guess wasn't like Iron Man 3 kind of the same way?
Yeah.
Like, was that really needed? I think the only biggest thing I would take away from that is you get like the Hulk armor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's all. Iron Man 3 was just like, everyone probably wanted to see more Iron Man suits because he has 1,000 suits. And so they were like, all right, we'll make a movie where you get to see all the suits.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Because I don't think anything from that movie continued, right? Hulk armor wasn't in that movie. The fact that he has other suits.
Yeah, it's like other suits, and then you just get the nod in game with the boy that helped him out.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
What about Pepper? Did Pepper... I could be misremembering, but I feel like she showed up in Endgame and could actually help because she got like some kind of weird powers in Iron Man 3.
They teased her getting a suit in Iron Man 3.
Okay.
Well, yeah, she did get the weird, like, superheated powers, but that just sort of disappeared at the end of Iron Man 3. But then
I'm
they
trying
were
to remember
like,
she did something useful in
I don't think so. I don't even think she shows up in an Iron Man suit. Because the whole thing with Endgame is then he like builds the helmet and he says he's building it for the mom, but now, you know, now in 2021 we're seeing that like, oh, they're kind of teasing his daughter being not Ironheart, but the Protector, right? So it's kind of like, well, this whole time you've been kind of teasing us that you were making Pepper Potts Ironheart, and now, never mind, we're just going to do Protector with, I can't remember his daughter's name.
Morgan.
Starts with a Morgan, yeah.
Morgan, yeah.
So I don't know.
I will say I enjoyed Iron Man 3 more than Iron Man 2. And also, it did give us Guy, gosh, his last name has totally escaped me for just a moment.
Is it Guy Pearce?
Guy Pearce, yes. We have an MCU movie with Guy Pearce in it, which is just a gift. But that is a digression from Thor and Avengers.
Well, I guess last thing on Iron Man 3 is, I mean, now we're getting Shang-Chi, so we'll get an actual Mandarin. It's kind of cool.
Right. Finally correcting a lot of those things.
Retconning a movie that didn't really need to be made.
Circling back to the Avengers, did either of you ever hear like the rumors of like that Spider-Man was like in Avengers?
That he was the little boy?
Well, so there's I think the little boy was a theory, and maybe I just kind of got threads crossed, but so many people were just like in the post credit scene. They're like, you can like Spider-Man's there, he's in there, and I was like, no, no, he's not. Like the little boy makes sense if you look at like the timeline. Like I've gone into that fan theory, and yeah, it makes sense. Like that probably is could very well be Peter Parker. But yeah, there was like a rumor like everyone was like, watch the end credit scene when they're in the restaurant because like you'll see Spider-Man or like a reference to Spider-Man or something. And I look and look and look every time and I don't see anything.
Yeah, the little kid with the Iron Man helmet is what I've always heard. Like, oh, that's Peter Parker. But at the same time, I've also heard that that's supposed to be the kid that helps him in Iron Man 3, which like also could be true. And I feel like
true,
that makes more sense to me than it being Peter Parker, because why would Peter Parker, I don't know, dress in Iron Man stuff? I feel like I don't know. I just felt like it made more sense in my mind to be like, that little kid is the kid from Iron Man 3 because he likes Iron Man and he likes building Iron Man stuff. So he dressed like Iron Man.
Yeah.
But also in, related to fan theories, and this is kind of beyond a fan theory because part of it was confirmed by Marvel as being correct. How Loki shows up at the beginning looking completely terrible. And the fan part is where they said that they think that the reason why he shows up and is clearly in pain, because there's even a part where he like stumbles and like makes like a sound like he's hurt whenever he has first gathered up his people, and they said that they think that he had to have been tortured into submission into helping Thanos and the other. I don't know how much of that I believe. I mean, it makes sense because they're clearly trying to indicate that something has happened to him for him to be acting this way and also looking, again, just awful. Because even my husband's like, wow, he looks terrible. I was like, thanks, honey. That's not nice. But also it could be, he's just traveled across the universe through a wormhole that is presumably full of radiation and is not built for safe travel like the Rainbow Bridge or anything like that. So it could just be that he's like being torn apart at a molecular level and just kind of survives because he's Asgardian. The part that Marvel has confirmed is that the scepter with the Mind Stone, and when we see it whenever it's in the room with all the Avengers, it makes them start kind of arguing and picking at each other. And they said that he was at least partly under the control of the scepter in that movie. So every time he held it, he wasn't immune to the effect that it had, and it was dragging out all the worst parts of him and making him act out against his brother and everyone. There's even the scene where he's having the conversation with Thor, and he said the last thing he remembers about seeing his brother is Thor throwing him off the bridge, which is not, that's not what happens. He lets go. And so it could be, and this is probably being just a little bit too kind to Loki, because I mean, he is kind of a bad dude. I love him, but he is a bad dude. That it's gotten into his head so badly that he doesn't even know what is real anymore. And he feels like he's doing this at least partly in self-defense. He believes Thor wants to kill him because he's a frost giant. So yeah, I don't know how much of that is true.
I mean, I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it's the little things like that tie the story together. Especially like, I don't even know if I paid much attention to him when he was like, I paid attention to him being disheveled. I was probably just like, oh yeah, he's like running away. And even just thinking about Loki being disheveled, like in Thor 2 when Thor goes to see him in prison, and he looks all clean, and then he like gets rid of the illusion, and he's like leaning up against the wall, and the table's flipped over, and everything's dirty. And I was like, this is cool. Like we're getting to see Loki, I don't know, break down sort of. and get to see him more as a character. And that's why I think that he was better in Thor 2, because we got to see Tom Hiddleston play Loki to Loki's extent. So I'm really excited to see him do more.
Yeah, in the Dark World, he's not he's not the villain of that movie. He's more like an anti-hero, and he does manage to redeem himself before he turns around. I was like, nah, I'm going to do this really selfish thing here at the end. So he's a bad dude.
Yeah.
But I feel like his badness in the Avengers is exacerbated by the Mind Stone. And in Thor, he had his feelings hurt real bad. He thinks his dad doesn't love him, and he thinks that he's a monster because he's a frost giant. It makes him very sad, and he's trying to impress his daddy.
Yeah.
Well, and I almost feel like in Thor 2, like you were saying, Elisa, that maybe we were supposed to end Thor 2 with Loki being redeemed and being semi-good, whether we believed or not he was dead, but just being like, oh, he's semi-redeemed. And then someone was like, no, we really need to drive home that he's bad. So then they added him, like, transforming after that conversation. So I don't know. It's weird, because I feel like they're doing like these movies are just now coming out, but I feel like in that movie it seemed like what they did with Zemo in Falcon and Winter Soldier, where they made him likable, made you kind of on his side. You know he's a bad guy, and he did some bad things even in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but then he redeems himself at the end, and then you're good. But then someone was like, nah, no, don't do that.
Well, I think in the comics, even from the very beginning, when he was introduced basically as an antagonist for Thor, even though it was, if I'm remembering this issue correctly, it says it's his half-brother, not his adopted brother. One thing I remember distinctly is whenever he shows up on Earth after he releases himself from Asgardian prison, is he immediately has a fangirl. There's a girl on the street that completely loses her mind. She's like, oh, he's so romantic and handsome. He said like one thing. He's just showed up and is causing trouble, and she's all about Loki already. And so I think that they've kind of encouraged us to be like, well, he might be a little bit bad, but, he can't be too bad. He's got good qualities.
He's a bad boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
A bad boy. Wink.
These traits of his character. This is where I'm going to get little nervous for the show, right? Because I don't want it to be like every episode it's just kind of like this huge wave of like, all right, whatever he's up to, okay, he's clearly gonna be like a villain, and then it's gonna like the next episode like, well, no, he's gonna be good, and then the next episode, oh, now he's back to, I really hope they don't do that. I hope it's just like subtle enough to where you kind of in the back of your mind like, what's he up to? And then just kind of like at the end, just really kind of give us like a solid ending to the series.
Yeah.
I think that the rumors about it being extra seasons is going to be true.
Of it being multiple seasons?
Yes. And so, like, I think that what it is going to end up being, and it's going to take probably at least 3 seasons. And this is just me thinking. I could be super duper wrong. I think it's the arc is going to be he's eventually going to wield Mjolnir. He's going to become just good enough to where he's worthy to hold Mjolnir.
That'd be interesting. I feel like they're, with them kind of not, again, we haven't seen Love and Thunder, so we don't know, and we don't work for Marvel, so we don't know what their plan is, but it seems to me like they're kind of working the original Avengers out and trying to figure out what are the next steps for new Avengers. So I could almost see this Loki show, like, it being a couple seasons, because Tom Hiddleston's not done being Loki, whether or not Chris Hemsworth is done being Thor, but you can't really have Loki without Thor. So then they were like, well, we'll just put Loki in a different timeline, and then we can keep doing fun Loki things without it necessarily like needing to affect whatever the current timeline is in the movies.
Yeah. So right now, I don't even see that Loki is in.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't been confirmed for it. But bearing in mind,
unless they're gonna like maybe have him be like the post credits.
I mean, they could do a ton of stuff because like
secret.
Tom Hiddleston was on a Marvel stage literally all last year. They could have easily filmed something with him and then just sent it off to Taika Waititi and been like, "Here, dude, whatever you need with this." I don't think he's going to be an important character in it, but I think he'll be in it.
If they're showing Portman as also being Mighty Thor, then I feel like there needs to be a scene with her character and Loki together at some point. You know, that would be really interesting. The question is like, if they did that, would she be Jane Foster or would she be Mighty Thor?
I was just going to say, like, it could even be sort of like the Martian Manhunter thing from Justice League, where, like, I mean, at this point, Loki can change into anybody. Yeah. So anybody in any of these movies could easily become Loki later on. So, like, it could be that he's not on the, you know, the released cast list for Love and Thunder, but then, like, 2 weeks before it releases, they're like, okay, quick, go CG this person to transform into Tom Hiddleston just for a scene. And it be like something where they just slip him in just to have him in there, but maybe like nobody knows, not even like the main cast. Yeah. I mean, I feel like so many of them get busted spoiling things that now maybe they're just to a point where they're like, we're not going to tell you anything. Mm-hmm. None of you get to know.
Spider-Man could be in this one.
Exactly. Nobody knows what any of these movies are about anymore. You show up on your green screen stage and you do what we tell you to do, and then a movie comes out, and it's crazy. What were you going to say earlier, at least? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. I was only going to say I've been doing my very, very best to stay away from any Love and Thunder spoilers, no set photos, nothing. I'm trying to go into it completely blissfully unaware of what's going to be in the movie. But I accidentally did see a set photo, and it was of Natalie Portman with the biggest biceps I've ever seen on a woman. I was like, oh my gosh. I don't know. I was not anticipating that. Like, I knew that she was going to be some version of Thor in it because that was like the first thing they announced. They brought her out on stage. She's like, oh, she's going to be playing Jane Foster in Thor. Good. Great. Looking forward to it. Again, I was not prepared.
Yeah. I don't think I saw that one. I did see one other one with two other characters, like a behind the scenes type thing. But we don't have to go into that.
Shh.
Well, we may post the bicep picture on our social media page.
If we can find it.
I'll post 4 bicep pictures, and you tell me which one is Natalie Portman.
Now I want to see Loki fight Spider-Man. I think that would be really fun.
I think Loki fighting anybody.
Loki turning into Spider-Man. So it's like Spider-Man versus Spider-Man.
I mean, maybe that happens in No Way Home.
Something that's really funny is how
Loki, he will actually be Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire.
Spider-Man's
that
just
would be
confused.
trippy.
Yeah.
He's gone from being so tiny and skinny in the first Thor movie to like just slowly getting more and more swole over all of them. And that was something that I remembered reading about is, you know, he was originally reading for Thor. And so he put on like 20 pounds of muscles and all sorts of stuff. And then Brandon told him, I don't want you as Thor. Lose 20 pounds immediately. And told him that he was playing Loki, even though he hadn't even read for Loki. And so he had to like starve himself to get rid of all of his new muscles and get all, you know, like skinny and British again. But since then, and I think that there's going to be kind of a weird transition because he wasn't built like he was or is even now in Avengers. And so we're getting that Loki in the show and he doesn't look the same. I mean, I even noticed in the trailer his hair is different. I guess I could be like, oh, the radiation singed his hair off. That's why it's 3 inches shorter.
Yeah, I wonder. I was thinking the exact same thing after we saw Endgame. I was like, man, so for this Loki show, they're either going to have to explain away the end of Endgame, or the show is going to have to pick up right after the end of Endgame, because he just disappears with the Tesseract.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be what it is. He picks up that Tesseract, takes him into a new timeline, and then he gets caught by the TVA for messing stuff up.
Yeah, I feel like that's how pretty much all the fans are probably, that's what we're expecting for the intro, something like that.
So maybe he'll have long hair for a scene, and then he gets caught and they cut his hair or something.
I think that first scene in the very first trailer where he's like in the middle of the desert and he's in like his regular Loki suit and he like gets up and he's like, what just happened? That's got to be like the very, very beginning of the show. That's got to be whenever he first crashes wherever he is, Utah. But he's got the short hair already.
Well, I'm going to be on the underdog side, and I'm going to say that scene won't pop up until halfway through the season.
We'll have to see.
All right. Well, now that we've gone through the Thor movies, to kind of get
except for
prepped,
Ragnarok.
yeah, except for Ragnarok, to kind of get prepped for Loki. Let's see, how long do we have before Loki comes out? I know 2 days less, but
June 9th.
So 1, 2, 3. We have 3 more weeks. Three more Wednesdays, rather.
Okay. Yeah, oh, yeah, that's right. It comes on a Wednesday. All right. Well, do you think that for next week we should do Ragnarok and Endgame? I mean, I guess both Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
I was about to say, we have to get Infinity War. That's where he dies, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Quote
dies,
unquote, yeah.
not quote unquote, but also quote unquote.
For the fourth time now, I think.
I lost count.
His fourth death. So next week we
can rank our favorite Loki death scenes.
Oh, I like that. Well, next week we will talk about Ragnarok, which I think it's up there for me. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's one of my favorites. So
it's up there for sure.
And then Infinity War and Endgame, where we will get to kind of actually see potentially what leads into the Loki show. So be prepared for that. If you're not already, make sure to follow us on social. I'm going to be better about posting on social. I've been slacking lately. But definitely check out our social. We will be posting our favorite, maybe we'll do top 5 favorite Marvel movies and bottom 5 least favorite Marvel movies. There's like 30 to choose from. So that will be coming soon, as well as maybe some fact check after this wrap up. I'll jump in with the fact check on some of the things we talked about. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Be sure to join us next week. And fact check's coming up. All right, so we're here for the first ever Marvel's Ace Content Enthusiast fact check. We'll start doing this at the end of every episode to kind of go back through things that we talked about, make sure that we didn't misspeak or misremember any information. So for this week to start, we're going to talk about when Odin transforms into Loki at the end of Thor 2. In the episode, we talked about whether or not this was scripted or if this was something that they decided later on. Turns out it was scripted. Loki tricks Odin and leaves him at a retirement home, which is where we pick up in Thor Ragnarok. So yes, that indeed played out the way it was supposed to. The second thing that we're going to fact check today is I mentioned a couple times that Morgan may be playing Ironheart. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, Ironheart is the superhero name of the teenager Riri Williams. Now, there is an Ironheart series.
in the works, been teased, and it seems like Riri Williams will be playing Ironheart. Now, upon further research, I've seen that Morgan may show up in Ironheart, but I'm not really sure whether or not she's going to play a role as a supersuited hero, or if she's just going to kind of show up and be like, maybe help Riri out. It's still up in the air as what Morgan could be, but it looks like for now she's just going to be Morgan Stark. One of the other things that we want to talk about is the set from the first Thor movie, and whether or not that town was a soundstage or whether that town was an actual town. Well, it kind of turns out neither. It's a little bit more closely related to a soundstage, I would say, but they actually built that entire town just for that movie. So I don't know if that town is still around. Maybe it is. You can go see it. I would assume they probably tore it down after shooting or blew it up. Who knows? But it was indeed built just for the filming of Thor. The last thing we're going to talk about in the fact check is Loki's first appearance. Now, in the Marvel history, Loki's first appearance came in 1949. Loki was a member of the Olympian gods. They were exiled to the underworld. He was kind of a bad dude. He was actually modeled after the devil. It wasn't until 1962, when Loki was reintroduced as Thor's sworn enemy, that we see Loki that we know today, with the big horns and the green scaly armor. The Loki from the Marvel Comics has always been an adopted brother. His father, who was a frost giant, was defeated by Odin, and his sort of dying wish was that Odin take care of his son, and so out of respect for his fallen enemy, Odin takes care of the frost giant's son and raises him to be Loki. Well, that about does it for our fact check this week. Be sure to check in next week when we talk about Thor Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame. See you next week.